Throughout history, humans have always done one thing. We explored. We crossed oceans before knowing what lay beyond them. We climbed mountains simply because they were there. We mapped the stars long before we understood what they were. Across civilizations, humans observed, questioned, experimented, and created, trying to understand the laws of nature, the patterns of life, and even their own existence. We discovered fire, we studied the human body, we built civilizations and told stories to explain our place in the universe. But here is something strange. This drive was never only about survival, because even when survival was secured, we kept asking questions. But why? Why does a child instinctively ask why again and again? Why do thinkers dedicate entire lives to understanding reality? Something deeper seems to move us. A curiosity, a longing, and an impulse to understand. Philosophers have noticed this for thousands of years. The great thinker Aristotle famously wrote that all humans naturally desire to know. Learning, in his view, was not imposed from outside, it was part of human nature itself. But if learning is natural, why does it so often feel unnatural in school? If we look at school systems around the world, they are all very different. Different countries, different cultures, different programs. Yet many have a very specific pattern, which is pressure when it comes to examination and exams, to the point where in many cases even mental health and well-being become secondary. And this pattern says so much, not only about school systems' functioning or flows, but also about modern society's perception of the purpose of education and learning. Because this means that we treat learning as a performance, only as a tool that will allow us to get the good grades, the top rankings, and overall the external validation and recognition, which becomes the final goal. The American philosopher John Dewey warned about this more than a century ago. He argued that education should not prepare students merely to pass tests, but to participate thoughtfully in life itself. And yet, modern systems often seem to treat learning as a competition for external validation. A number replaces understanding, a score replaces curiosity, and something profoundly human becomes reduced to performance. And this creates a paradox. School is supposed to cultivate learning, yet many students begin to dislike learning precisely there. So the real question is no longer just how we learn, it becomes why the human learned at all. Modern psychology offers an important clue. The developmental psychologist Jean Piaget observed that children actively construct knowledge by exploring their environment. They are not passive recipients of information, they are natural investigators. In other words, curiosity comes first, instruction comes later. Neuroscience now supports this idea. The brain releases reward signals when we solve uncertainty or discover new patterns. Learning literally feels meaningful because our biology encourages exploration. From an evolutionary perspective, learning helps us to adapt. But adaptation alone cannot explain philosophy, art, or science. Humans do not only learn to survive, we learn to understand. Across intellectual traditions, thinkers reached a similar conclusion through a different path. The Muslim historian and philosopher Ibn Khaldun described knowledge as the foundation of civilization itself, the force that allows societies to grow, organize, and renew themselves. Centuries later, educators and philosophers echoed this same idea. Education is not merely the transmission of facts, but formation of the mind. Learning shapes how we see reality. It expands perception, it refines judgment, it allows us to imagine worlds that do not yet exist. This is why learning persists even when it is difficult, because at its deepest level, learning is not just practical, it is existential. We learn to answer a question that every human eventually faces: what does it mean to exist in this world? If learning is intrinsic to human nature, then education should not suppress curiosity, it should protect and guide it. Education should provide tools to understand the world, tools to question assumptions, to reshape reality responsibly. Its purpose is not simply to produce high scores, but thoughtful minds. Not conformity, but understanding. Not performance, but transformation. When education aligns with our natural drive to explore, learning becomes energizing rather than exhausting. And perhaps this is the deeper truth: learning is the human spirit in motion. A constant journey of discovery, reflection, and transformation that allows us not only to know the world, but to understand ourselves and our place in it. Perhaps the problem is that we forgot why we learn. Long before classrooms existed, before exams, before grades and rankings, humans were already students of the world. A child looking at the sky, a traveller following the horizon, a thinker wondering what lies behind existence itself. Learning was never a race, it was a relationship between the human mind and the unknown. Somewhere along the way, we began to measure knowledge instead of experiencing it. We started asking, how well did you perform, instead of what did you understand? So in my perspective, education is not supposed to fill an empty mind, it is supposed to awaken one. Not to give us all the answers, but to make us brave enough to keep asking questions. Because every discovery humanity has ever made began the same way. Someone looked at the world and refused to stop wondering. So the question is no longer, how successful are we at school, but rather, what kind of thinkers do we become once we remember why we wanted to learn in the first place? And maybe that is where education truly begins.